Paige Pettibon seed sta Salish chud Tola al chud Salith Ali Washitubsh. My name is Paige Pettibon. I'm Bitterroot Salish and I'm black and white, and I'm from Tacoma, Washington. My pronouns are she, her. I am a visual artist, a fiber art worker, and then I also do fine jewelry, and it spans just from permanent art pieces, so like murals, and then I do portraits and I do digital media that can be found at the Space Needle or at the Seattle Aquarium. Woodland Park Zoo has some of my jewelry. I basically like to learn and try new things, and I have a lot of inside of me to have expressed through any kind of medium, so I don't stick to one thing. I harvest in the area and I make baskets, or I also will weave anything that I can use with my hands. I do in a contemporary way with traditional values and ideas and lineage incorporated. So I try to make it accessible to everybody, that's all ages, and have different places that my work can be found, from indoor or like at a gallery to I've even done some work for the Muckleshoot tribal schools for their education. Yeah, it just spans all around the area. I grew up in an urban setting. I am Bitterroot Salish from Montana, but I was born and raised on the Puyallup Reservation. And there were maybe some visuals of Indigenous folks around, but I wasn't well versed in the culture as I am now. And so it was something I had to go seek and be active in learning and listening and being patient with myself and knowing that these things take time. And I'm an avid researcher, and I will follow down the rabbit hole of things. And I've done some outreach to folks in being possibly involved in, learning things. And there's a reciprocal way of doing that I've learned along the way too. I would say that I was spiritually sick for a very long time. And in my youth, I knew I was an artist, but I didn't have the other part of my identity. Like, I identified as an artist at a young age, and so I had these practical and technical skills that I was developing, but the content, I guess, identity of who I was like not developed yet. And so I like a lot of people I know, when you're part of like the oppressed culture, oppressed people, and you are finding your way, sometimes you find your way down paths that are really good for you. And so I've been sober for 11 years now, and through this journey I've connected with my culture. I've connected with the land that I've lived on, with the Puyallup people. They've been so generous with like sharing their language, their culture, their songs and dances with me, which is another way of connecting to who I am, because I'm also of this place. I was born in Tacoma, and I dwell in the Puget Sound region and going to Mount Rainier and everything. So having my connections to the tribes here was really important for me, because I always felt like there was a connection to this place for me, as I know a lot of people do that live here. But I felt like there was also this secret that I needed to unlock. And when I started learning the language, I felt like it was just like I kept on unlocking doors and seeing this world in a way that I was lacking, and I didn't know what it was, but it was like my spirit was like guiding me through this and saying like, this is for you. But there was like community that also was helping me guide my journey through this exploration of nature with an Indigenous paradigm, with these Indigenous stories. The stories that I learned from folks in this area, they really share the histories of place and animals and plants and creator and purpose and great change that has happened with settlement. And being able to understand these stories through the language, because English doesn't always have the right words to express the things that we need to express as Indigenous people. It really changed how I started interpreting art. I said to myself, like, this is the language that makes sense to me. Indigenous languages make sense to me, and visual language makes sense to me. And so pairing traditional narrative with visuals was something that made a lot of sense to me. And it also helps me connect with space. I live in this multicultural existence, and I've always found myself to be in this gray area that a lot of people find hard to categorize, and I'm like, we don't have to. I love that non-binary is a concept that has been rising on the forefront in so many different ways, and it's something that I have identified at a young age, but couldn't find the language to verbally say it. I've always used art as a way to tell my story and to tell these express these deep feelings of duality that I couldn't really explain. And I feel like people resonate with symbolism, and people resonate with animals or faces. There's some context to it that is personal for the viewer, which I really appreciate, because with Indigenous storytelling, you don't tell the moral of the story. You come up with your own moral, and it changes throughout your life in different stages. And so that's what I think of when I'm an artist. You can put anything out there and people will interpret it the way that they do, even if it's not necessarily your intention. So I do put really great intention in my work to be very accurate and thorough and well researched. But I know at the end of the day, the viewer is going to take away what they want, and I have to have grace with that too. A lot of people have identified me as something that I'm not. My hair has a lot to do with how people perceive me, whether I have it curly or straight, long or shorter, or a different color. And I've had to deal with my physical appearance, the size that I am, the way that I look, a lot with people, because they think that indigeneity looks one way and black looks one way. It's been a conflict for me in how do I just be without external influences that try to place these names or statements onto me that don't really fit what I see myself as. A lot of the growth I've had in the last year would be to be proud of myself. I can only be that for myself. So I found that I was working too much, right? I felt like I had something to prove not that long ago, and I'm like, where does this come from? Where does this feeling like I have to prove that I'm this and this and this, Do I feel that way? And I always have to remind myself, I know who I am. I know how hard my ancestors worked for me to be here, and it wasn't easy. And surviving was a very difficult thing to do. And sometimes it looks like denying your indigeneity and denying your blackness and denying where you're from. And I'm not gonna let someone take that away from me again, from my people, from my ancestors, from my parents, my grandparents. They didn't work as hard for me to deny all the parts of me. I think of myself as, like I said, a creator that likes to create hope, and I feel like we are at a deficit of people of color being represented in art completely, and making art. And so I'm gonna make femme art because I like femme art. They're gonna look different. Femme has a magnitude of expressions. And then I'm also gonna make art of people that are brown because there's not a lot of it. I mean, growing up, if I saw that, that would have maybe changed the course of my life. People are like, oh, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? You know, you find your touch with nature. Like, you find your touch with anything that you are really good at, whether you're a mechanic or a doctor or whatever. Like, you have your own touch in that practice, and that's what it's like working with the land, working with language. You have your voice, they receive your voice, and then you are now in relationship with them. So that is a huge component. Not everyone does that, and not everyone even has the idea or concept of that, but if there's one thing that I think could make a huge impact in longevity of like this place that we call home, it is that.